All right, welcome everyone to our virtual panel, Does One Size Fit All? How Brands Are Approaching In-House Capability in Programmatic and Beyond. My name is Paul Connecton. I'm our CMO here at Beeswax. I'm just gonna go over a couple housekeeping things. This panel and discussion will be 45 minutes. There will be some Q&A at the end. If you'd like to ask your question live and turn on your camera and interact with the host and panelists, please just use the raise hand feature that Zoom has. Otherwise, you can submit your question using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. You can see our wonderful host and the panelists usually on the right side of your screen, but you can minimize that if they're obscuring the slides and you'd like to see that. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce our host, our very own Cadi Jones, who is the commercial director of Beeswax in Europe, Middle East, and Africa. So Cadi, I'll let you take it from here.
Paul, thanks so much for the warm welcome. And yes, per that first slide, I'm here with some great panelists today, just to give a little bit of content and hopefully brighten up everyone's working from home times with a bit of insight into how brands are really thinking about all of the different capabilities that they might want to have, and some of those potentially being in-housed, both across programmatic and further afield. And as Paul said, I'm Cadi Jones. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the commercial director for Europe, Middle East and Africa here at Beeswax. And so I think as everyone knows, programmatic is sort of now digital. And it's certainly one area where brands have been looking at in-housing some level of capability. That might be simply, in its simplest form, in-housing the ownership of the contract, so that they will be signing their own relationship, their own contract with a DSP, with their own DMP, all the way through to something that might be much more like actually hands-on keyboards in those systems. And just also by way of background, this sort of in-housing as a topic really sort of came to light maybe 4 years or so ago with a big study that the American Association of National Advertisers ran, looking into just how much ad spend was going in out of that sort of programmatic value chain to various other platforms who oftentimes are working on a percentage of media basis, so taking a percentage of every dollar that's spent out of working media. And that again could be SSPs, DSPs, DMPs, and so on. And I think that's really what's triggered the sort of thinking that maybe one size doesn't always fit all. And in-housing has to be very open to interpretation. For some brands, that might be owning their own content and their own content production studios in-house. For other brands, it might be owning their own contracts and signing their own paperwork, so they have those contracts in place. But really, this is just about sizes, but there are also a range of flavors and so on to in-housing across the board. And so I'm really excited today to hear a bit more from our panelists about what those different sizes and different flavors might be. There has been a little bit more research into this that I thought would be interesting to share. So the IAB and Accenture put out a report back in 2018, which looked at sort of drawing out the key themes that some brands are giving for where they are in-housing. Again, that definition of in-housing was somewhat vague, so it could be any of those elements that I've touched on a little bit. The first one, improved ad performance ROI. I think some brands are really looking at specific performance factors on campaigns. Others are much more looking for transparency around the costs and what's going on in the contracts in terms of fees and so forth. Coming into the third piece, I think some folks are really keen on controlling and having better control of their first party data. And that's something that I think we'll touch on in our panel discussion in a bit more detail. For other brands, it was much more about that execution, the actual activation and optimization of campaigns. And for others, really about focusing on brand goals. So there's quite a number of different reasons that some brands are giving when they are thinking about in-housing certain functions. To sort of tie those themes together across those five, I think it really comes down into these sort of three core elements, sometimes around transparency, other times it can be around flexibility and that speed, and sometimes it can be really around control and having that that additional ability to perhaps prioritize differently. And a lot of those three themes sort of tie into a more general theme around digital transformation. It's a theme that many offline brands are looking at the moment. This is a quote from Gerhard Löw over at Deutsche Telekom, who's talked about, again, just bringing those three themes to life. He talks about neutrality, transparency, and flexibility being the core drivers for them as they've been going through an in-house process. And so without further ado, having given you some background, I'd love to introduce my my eminent panelists to the conversation. We have Liz Salway from over at the team at Nestlé, Leïla Lazreq from Unilever, and Griff leader from over at Kaspersky. And I'd like to go in that order. If you could just give us your very first take on this topic of in-housing and one size fits all. Liz,
sure.
Would you like to start?
Sure, Katie, thanks. Yeah, so as Katie said, I'm Liz and I'm working in the global e-business team at Nestlé, and really what I'm focusing on is implementing their audience first approach in both media planning and buying. So, you know, those kind of studies that Katie mentioned, I think I would agree to a large degree, but for me, they have slightly different 5-pillar approach to this topic. And I think point number 3 around data is where it starts for me. So I think brands have come to realize that data has gone from if you like, a third-party tool to drive better programmatic targeting into a first-party asset. And it's an asset that they want to understand, be able to pull back into their insights team and build more of a bridge into activation. So when you take that approach, obviously you start looking at tools in-house like a DMP, which is sort of building that bridge initially between MarTech and AdTech. So the second pillar is around technology. So once you have a DMP, then there is interest in potentially owning your own ad server relationship, and also say a DSP seat. So they're the first two. Then I think, you know, we start to get into specialism. So the final 3 for me are, you know, activation, creative / content, and expertise. And my feeling really is those latter 3 can't be, you know, sort of taken for granted or diminished, because I think for this to be a successful endeavor, it very much needs to be that triumvirate between the brand, the creative and media agency, and not to forget about the expertise that they're bringing. So, you know, a lot of talk is made around transparency. I think actually the supply chain has become much more, you know, sort of uncomplicated in terms of being able to access the different amounts that's being taken along there. It's not as it used to be. So taking it more from a business first approach, the in-housing is for me sort of a more strategic long-term view.
Liz, thank you. I think those are 5 pillars that really that stand up to a lot of parallels with those 5 that came out through that IAB research. And it's really different to hear it direct from a brand. Thank you. Leïla, would you introduce yourself and a little bit of your thoughts on this topic?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Hi, Katie. So I'm Leïla. I have spent nearly my entire career so far in D2C and digital native brands and platforms. Spent a number of years at eBay, and I currently head up digital strategy for our home care business at Unilever. And I think Liz touched on that. I suppose what's been definitely occupying a lot of the conversations in the past couple of years at Unilever is around creative and content. So, I mean, programmatic probably isn't much without what we define to be creative or content. So I suppose just to take a small step back and share a bit of context, obviously Unilever has woken up quite recently and adapted to all these opportunities and threats offered by digital and ad technology. And I suppose the change that we're operating at really business-wide sort of scale and level is around establishing digital culture and building our ability to transform a business that really once relied on mass reach into a true data-driven sort of enterprise, and being able to communicate with consumers on a truly one-to-one basis and do that at scale. So in other words, if you're a Dove brand manager and you are planning a campaign targeting women between 18 and 49, there's this is very likely going to be vastly inadequate. So this kind of shifting so aggressively and so abruptly into digital and trying to embed that into your existing model has really triggered an unprecedented need for a ton more content and production. So the solution to sort of respond to that volume and increase turnaround speed was to just build a content creation engine through UStudio. So that is our on-site resourcing. So it's a sort of model built in collaboration with Oliver, and which I would call a hybrid model for content creation rather than purely in-house. And we found that having that in place works for us because of the proximity it creates with marketing. It does mean that content creation is sort of a desk away from our commercial and comms priorities, and all the anticipated benefits that you could expect from that around speed, but also less waste and quality, cost, agility, all that stuff. But this is very much complementing our wider agency ecosystem and roster. So the brand strategic thinking and expression system and still is very much sat with our ad agencies. So we haven't moved away from that model. UStudio is very much there to complement.
Oh, that's great to hear, and also brilliant that it's tying in so nicely with that theme around of digital transformation that's going across the wider business there. Griff, I'll let you introduce yourself, but you have quite a different angle on this at Kaspersky.
Yeah, I suppose. Thanks, Katie. So my name's Griff. I work at Kaspersky. We are a security firm. So ordinarily we and sell direct to customer, antivirus software, security for PC, desktop, Mac, and of course, current digital landscape is increasing demand all the time for the latest and greatest versions of those. So we're constantly being pushed from developers to create better products. My background is actually it's the first sort of client-side role that I've had, and traditionally I've been part of a manner of different types of teams, and the range spans from being on a team I led with anything like 10 to 15 clients through to dedicated agency teams focused and built specifically individual clients, and now into this in-house team that we have at Kaspersky. And there are different sort of tensions and different needs and different qualities that exist in all of the different setup. From our point of view currently, we're reasonably, I think, unique in that we've always been in-house. So for us, it's not a question of what we bring in-house, it's almost in the only last year, or the beginning of the year, the end of the year before, did we put out our business tender for the first time into the process. So, we're only now really understanding the balance of having internal resource versus outsourced agency support, and trying to sort of come to grips with scope, remit, responsibilities, ways of working, SLAs, all those kind of nuances that ordinarily in an agency team point of view would be set up from almost that you walk into a new job in an agency. So we're now sort of having to processes and ways of working to be able to facilitate better work with our agency partners. So that's where we are at the moment. We'll come on to a lot more of the sort of the new of the different aspects of what that means for us as we go through the session.
Yeah, it's great to hear everyone coming at it from a slightly different perspective. I think maybe if I can, to sort of, you all seem to work at brands who have some level of in-house capability, whether that's creative partnerships or actively on hand, hands-on keyboards across search, perhaps display as well. Liz, perhaps maybe you could start by telling us what you think maybe are some of the challenges that brands are really facing as they are thinking about their in-house capabilities.
So I would definitely say that it depends on the brand's DNA. So for, a digital first brand, a lot of the digital paid media won't be that foreign to them. They might have started off doing it themselves to start, in the very beginning. So their challenges around activation will still be there from the staffing point of view. I know from having gone through this journey with a few different kinds of brands in the last 4 years, that they all hit different kinds of challenges. Certainly when it comes to activation, the two biggest ones would be sort of underestimating, the value that you can get from somebody activating within the agency environment and their exposure across other ways of working and learning from each other that actually, makes their trading better. Whereas when it's in-house, you can tend to get a little bit, stuck in one way of thinking. So I have seen that to be true. And also the staffing up of getting people out of agency basically and into brand. It can be done, but it's my experience has shown that it's a lot more painstaking than you would think up front. And then in terms of other challenges, I think, for a brand within FMCG, or other sort of very heavily bricks and mortar businesses, they really will struggle to pivot to suddenly have the expertise of either a creative agency or a media agency. So they need to be very, very careful about which aspects they want to take ownership of. And really, as Leïla was saying, it's very much a partnership. There are certain aspects that you want to have more control over, and if that's your contracts, great. But it doesn't mean that you're then not reliant on your agency to execute. And another key thing for me is when you're within the brand, it's all of that insight and all of the understanding of your target audience sometimes doesn't translate very well over to activation. So you know, the benefits of those challenges, if you like, is that if you address that and you understand that, you know, understanding digital better will give you the tools you need to better brief your agency and to make sure that they have the full picture, not just across the comms plan, but, you know, the research and insight and all of the things that will make your programmatic buying better, because they'll have a much more 360 view of the consumer. I've seen that when that stays quite separate, it doesn't really benefit outcomes, because, you know, you're kind of asking the agency to, you know, to understand something that they haven't been told. So,
yeah, it's easy to see how that might get overlooked when you're sort of starting to think about this. Leïla, are there any challenges you think to add that people should be thinking about?
Yeah, I think, I mean, there is, you know, when companies are thinking about what part of your customer journey you may want to take control of, it better be something that obviously you know you can recruit for, but also you probably need to ensure that you have the time, resource and budget to build the capability around, and that's going to be something that is formed of skills that, you know, sit with people that you're going to be able to retain. So I suppose, you know, retention, once you've in-housed a certain set of skills or capability, is one potentially just to add to Liz's list to think about. So of course, I think, as I said before, some aspects, whether that has to do with data, with activation, with campaign, with ad ops, with creative or content, depending on the scale at which you're planning to in-house a certain part of your consumer journey, I think these are all just things to think about. So necessary skills, but can you retain them, I suppose, is a question.
Yes, and Griff, are these some of the challenges that you've seen at Kaspersky so far?
Yeah, to a certain extent. I think we all share similar challenges, and I think some of the challenges exist whether you're working with an external agency or in-house. For us, we're quite fortunate in that a lot of our communications, our tools, our disciplines, our divisions all sit within a digital environment. So we're very closely connected. So we have all of our channels, SEO, organic social, affiliates. We've recently just kicked off a creative development team as well in-house, and all of those exist within a newly sort of centralised global digital media team. So as we develop those disciplines in-house, we're learning how to sort of, whether you're working with join them up, and then, you know, how to manage what are meant to be the benefits of, you know, greater agility, knowledge of your consumer, more personalized messaging, and regional sort of around the world to try and put those benefits to practice. So we're very much work in progress. We're not hugely sophisticated like Unilever or Nestlé, but that allows us to experiment a bit more freely with the systems and the tools and the messaging that we're developing. So I think, you know, the challenge, one of the biggest challenges I think that exists both within dedicated teams in agencies and with in-house teams is the retention of talent and finding exactly to come into your organisation, because it's such a sort of intense environment. So in a previous role, I built a team to serve Lloyd Group in the UK for Group M, and there's only so many ways you can sell a current account, mortgage, or a loan. So you had to sort of find recent ways of creating a culture and creating enthusiasm around the same product and the same brand over again. Similarly for us, we're not just recruiting people to what's an in-house agency, we're recruiting people into a cybersecurity organization. So you know, there's always a duality of interest and sort of career progression that you need to look out for, that people still want to work in close proximity to media and marketing and international media in our case, plus want to further the cause of an organisation through its marketing efforts as well.
No, I think there's I think that's quite a lot of challenges there. I'm keen to talk about some of the positives as well. I think Griff, maybe you can start on this, just because I think, as you know, to your opening point, Kaspersky has always historically been in-house, and I think we've heard people talk about the benefits of in-housing being anything from, you know, transparency through to sort of speed and agility through the creative process, through sort of data targeting and optimization techniques. What are some of the main wins that you've experienced? And I'll ask all of my panelists to speak to the wins and to the positives. Griff, do you want to start? Or sorry.
So, I mean, all of those things that you mentioned first. Okay, I'll go. So I think from our point of view, a lot of those things that you mentioned just now all apply. We're getting better and better at it as we learn how to work in our new sort of centralized way of working. We, as an organisation, we're not an enormous company. We're 3,500 people. So all of our data, our systems, our processes are essentially all visible to most people. We don't really have sort of too many layers of hierarchy that limits people from seeing performance on a regular basis. So we have interconnected systems that allow us to see exactly what paid media is doing in terms of having an effect on revenue generation and performance. We don't really have one KPI organisation, which is revenue. So we're here to, you know, we're a commercial organisation, here to money and sell product. And so we're very much working to experiment very, very quickly what the effect of paid media is through multi-touch attribution, through Lazreq. We have sort of probably too much data for our own good, if anything's coming up with it. So understanding the context of that data performance for us is not easy to see. I think the challenge in that sense is picking the right data. Obviously, it doesn't always say exactly the same thing, but it allows us to understand what the interconnective effects are on each different discipline. So we can see if we're lots of funding search, how that what that kind of effect has on lower funnel performance. If we go up a funnel, then things like ROAS tend to more. But we open up pipes to get more people, different types of traffic into our commerce systems. And then further out beyond that, then into more branding, then we start to see how if by building reach, we're drawing more people into the product or homepage or more generic areas of our digital ecosystem that then eventually, over a bit of time, we see convert into sales through our tracking. So all of that stuff helps us to understand far better our consumer journeys, the efficiency of our messaging, and the efficiency of our media buying as well.
Yes, thank you, Griff. Leïla, I saw you nodding through some of that, and I know that that insights and data and campaign data is very close to your heart currently at Unilever, but also in previous roles. Is that something that how do you think about that in relation to in-housing or to?
Yeah, I was nodding through several parts of what Griff was saying, but you know, if a business like Unilever was, I suppose, clear that it was wanting, and it's still wanting, to improve its deep understanding of its customers and consumers, and to offer them a better service, then parts of in-housing or some form of in-housing just look to be a viable option. Particularly with what it means for data, regaining or running consumer data. The part I think that's quite different for us has to do with obviously where your sales are happening. So measurement is still a huge part of what we do, like any decent digital team, and we're still very much accountable for demonstrating the impact of what we do and where we are spending our brand and marketing investment, whether you do brand building or sales activation. So I suppose that the biggest difference for us and where that does differ for a CPG environment is where your transaction may happen, whether it's offline or online. We are still selling through third-party retailers. So a challenge that I imagine, and probably maybe Liz would agree to that, is a challenge that any CPG brand would face, is still regaining more ownership of your consumer data. So we do have audience specialist analysts in-house to lead on that, but certain types of data we will just naturally not own due to the way we do business. So for sales data, solutions of course do exist, and we still very much use those offered by third-party providers that help us map with a high level of governance, obviously, around data around it, and map ad exposure to anonymized club card data and sales conversions in store, and ultimately help us determine, you know, the uplift that you may have seen between people who have seen an ad and people who haven't, but also more interestingly, understanding the drivers of that uplift. So really getting to the bottom of shopper profiles, their lifestyle, potentially whether you captured net new buyers or did you just acquire people, or did you just talk to people or converted people who ended up buying you already but bought more of you, and then kind of feeding these learnings into your next iteration and your next campaign planning. So that I suppose is bringing it back to the conversation is a part that we need to collaborate with a number of people with to just get it done, simply because of the way our business model is structured.
No, it's fascinating. I think that brands that traditionally operate mostly offline have a whole different set of challenges here. I mean, Liz, at Nestlé, you have a kind of combination of the two, with brands like Nespresso and so forth, who are very much, you know, you do order direct from, and they are sort of in that DTC, direct to consumer kind of category. How do you think about that data, where you've got that combination of in-store shopper data and then the more digital brands?
So I mean, I suppose it kind of comes back to your question quite nicely, Cadi, actually, that it's definitely not one size fits all in the portfolio for Nestlé. And as I mentioned at the beginning around the importance of data, you know, let me be clear, the importance of data for a D2C brand is that much more than the importance of, you know, say capturing first party cookies on Smarties, or you know, even some of the food sites. There's a a very different value exchange to, you know, a CRM scenario in those two examples. So I think that, you know, you can't take the same approach with that. I think when it comes to measurement, obviously it's a lot easier for Nespresso to understand whether, you know, a campaign has delivered uplift through third-party measurement. That's a lot more challenging for some of the other brands because of, you know, there are other things at play. And yes, you can get that, but you know, I think measurement is a whole other topic that we'd probably get stuck down.
Well, speaking of huge topics that we don't want to get too drawn into, I am keen to talk a little bit about the cookie apocalypse. I think this was before we all went into lockdown. That was the sort of real hot topic in the industry.
Yeah.
And I think you know, so much of that was driven by Google's announcement of you know, their plans for getting rid of the third-party cookie in Chrome. Liz, maybe you can speak a little bit to what role you think there is for independent ad tech, specifically around driving innovation and driving this industry forwards.
You could argue that ad tech is to blame for this in the first place. No, from the point of view that, you know, we did get to a sort of a crisis point of just, you know, too much bad retargeting, you know, not enough clarity for users on what's happening to their data and how they can control that. But this isn't a new story. I mean, for me, it's a continuum, and it's been actually since the very beginning. There was a privacy group, you know, with Netscape in 94, 95 or whenever. And there was, you know, a valid concern about privacy back then, but the cookie was deemed too valuable to do anything about it, you know. So, you know, we've gotten to the point where everyone's a little freaked out because of the Chrome changes and the Chrome being such a majority market share in the browser landscape. So it is a genuine concern. The question around ad tech, yes and no, because you know, we do have a lot of universal ID solutions, which is one way of looking at how to construct a user ID without just the cookie. But that said, there's some challenges around how much you need the cookie to knit it all together. Plus, there are so many. How do they kind of cooperate with each other for the benefit of brands? And equally, we have a reality of, you know, walled gardens sort of owning the space from when it comes to identity, because they have, if you like, no need for third-party cookies in their ecosystem. So I think it might be a stretch for independent ad tech to solve the problem, because it is hard for, you know, the other technology in the market to kind of push way of working onto a Google or Facebook. You know, so I think that there isn't a clear answer. You know, there's a lot of talk about developing your own first party data. That's fine if you have a way of activating that at scale, which is CPG arguably does not. Not when you rely on third party cookies to find those people again. So, you know, that is one angle, but, you know, the relationship with publishers and the alliance that you can create with publishers, I think is actually quite a key component of this. You know, I think all brands want to work with publishers. They want to create, you know, enduring relationships with publishers where, you know, through say ad tech, independent ad tech, you can enable those alliances. So that would be true. And equally, I think retailers, you know, they're sitting on, you know, the full customer view, and we need to figure out how to get the balance between the control they have of the consumer, you know, end to end, and or part to play as a brand. So I think for now, we need to think about second party data and, you know, ways of working that are also possibly based on moments. So one thing I'm looking at is, you know, how does weather impact your targeting? How time of day, if you look at, say, coffee, you know, you have different messaging from morning to afternoon. You may have the ability to define different audiences based on context, and then deliver them a different ad and have a, if you like, more of a kind of portfolio view of that. So yes, I think ad tech can support, but I think in a way we're always scrabbling to see what the large walled gardens will do, and having in a way to exist within those frameworks.
Yes, I think it's fascinating. No, I think we said at the beginning, we should have, we have around 10 minutes left maximum to run. So we did want to invite questions from the audience. I think Paul in our marketing team will jump in to help field those. Paul, do we have any questions already? I certainly have some more questions I'm keen to put to Liz and Leïla.
Yes, but let's
leave time for our audience
a chance to ask their own as well. So here's one question from the audience, and I believe it's to the entire panel. As you bring operations in-house, what are you looking for from publisher partners? How would you define a perfect publisher for you to work with?
That's a great question. Liz, you should kick this off. You were just talking about second party data.
What's a good publisher partnership? I think an understanding that what you're looking for as a brand is you know, the ability to create their audience pool according to your brand requirements. So you know, I think long are the days, they're gone, where you just say, I'll buy everything. We do need to have data be front and center of the conversation. So it's not, and I think there's a bit of misnomer about you know, data sharing from publisher point of view. It's purely from the point of view from a brand to have better targeting and to just make sure that the message goes to the right person. It doesn't go beyond that. So I would say the willingness to, you know, have discussions that are two-way on, you know, the benefits of their inventory from a data lens. How can you help support the brand to know more about their consumers? And obviously that will vary greatly depending on publisher. So if I think about you know, some things that we would think about to support the food category would be recipe driven publishers, and a deeper relationship there with recipes and you know, with that kind of depth in the content. And you know, that's very different to a news publisher, which is much more about your reach frequency and you know, maybe it's much more focused on that, not so much on the data. And you know, the vertical publishers are key as well. So within pet care, working, you know, the US work very closely with Pet Finder because, you know, it makes sense to align on a category level with the right publishers. So
I think that's a brilliantly detailed answer and some really good tips from a data perspective. Leïla, you tell me what would be your response on that? What do you look for in a perfect publisher partnership?
I think there's a very interesting example from my previous life at eBay, right? We partnered up with Mashable simply because the intel was all around, can we be a bit more present instead of, you know, spending a lot of time trying to bring people onto our platform? How do we make sure we're present where they're already consuming content and spending their time? And there was, you know, part of it had to do with making the brand more relevant. So the partnership there had not so much to do with data. eBay had more than enough to play with, but it had more to do with making the brand more relevant and commerce enabling a publisher just to bring an experience outside of your platform. So what we were really solving for there, had very little to do with data and a lot to do with how people shopped, and kind of trying to go and fish for something that we didn't have.
I love that. So that's there's not one size fits all from a publisher partnership perspective either.
Nope.
Okay, I'm really conscious of time, because I know we have a hard stop coming up. So I'd love to ask the panelists. We appear to have lost Griff. I think there were some connectivity issues there. So I'd love to ask both Liz and Leïla, your closing thoughts, your one piece of advice. I mean, really, does one size fit all advertisers' needs? What is your advice?
I mean, I'd say, of course not. It'd be silly to say yes after everything I said and everything that's been discussed through the past hour. But you know, I think what with in-housing and beyond, whether you're doing that on applying this model to data, tech, activation, and all of the pillars that Liz has set out at the beginning of the call, I think is aiming for the same thing. You're trying to remove a certain type of silo and just create more networks, be more productive, gain speed, efficiencies, and you know where you're going to want is to ask yourself the right question as to, in the armory within marketing, what will make you faster to market, and you know, what are the capabilities that really are going to need to be in-housed or incorporated into your model to help you be faster, or to help you just place more relevant maybe content in front of the right consumers. So depending on that area, and that's what I meant by sort of plotting your consumer journey and trying to understand where in-housing or just a more networked, more de-siloed approach will really start and truly pay dividends for you.
Thank you. And Liz, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, you know, as Leïla kind of alluded to, think about what your strategy is, right? So what are you trying to do? What's the gap analysis that you think you need to be plugging, and make your decisions purely based on that. Because, you know, you need to make an honest assessment of you know, teams' bandwidth and skill sets, and what you need to have a better handle on that's actually going to drive the business forward, rather than just saying, okay, I want to have the ad tech stack contracts. It's like, well, why? You know, really think about that, and take it step by step, and review, and be prepared to iterate and to change your mind and to do things differently.
Thank you to all of my eminent panelists for joining us today and sharing such practical advice. We said that what we really wanted to do was to give some real actionable insights. So I'm really grateful to you all today for sharing that.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Welcome.
Perfect. And with that, Paul, how do we wrap?
Well, there will be a recording of this panel that we can distribute to all those who registered and attended. And we wrap by thanking you and everyone else and the attendees for joining. And we wish everyone health and hope everyone stays safe and is practicing good social distancing.
Yes, washing those hands.
Yes.
Thanks.
Until next time. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.